Evening, friends, and welcome to your Friday night review. Tonight we will be reviewing a rye whiskey, which would be, as you can see, I've drunk quite a bit of it because I love rye whiskey. I go through quite a bit of rye whiskey. This is Bulliet Rye Frontier Whiskey, small batch, 95% rye mash whiskey. Of course, they didn't make this juice themselves. This is from Lawrenceburg, Indiana, where it seems about 50% of all the ryes on the market come from. They're all supplied by a bulk distiller in Lawrenceburg. And that's a long, complicated story that I might write up a blog sometime about, or perhaps even a video. But enough about that. On to the whiskey. So, despite being from a bulk distiller, which supplies quite a few other brands, by the way, this is essentially the same juice that's in the George Dickel rye and the Templeton rye. So, you'll be paying in between. Sometimes you'll pay $20 for this juice, $25 for the, like in this bottle, or in the case of Templeton rye, nearly $40. Now, there are slight differences because how they handle the rye, how they handle the whiskey after they purchase it is often different. George Dickel chill filters as they do all their whiskeys. Templeton blends multiple bulk ryes together, I believe. Angel's Envy goes and post casks it in sherry casks, I believe it is. No, rum casks, and so on and so forth. So often you'll find that there are often large differences, but most often slight differences, especially in the more bargain end of the rye lines here. Focus, focus. Oy vey. I should just turn off that function. Okay, so there's not much legs here, and it's sort of a very orangey color, yellow-orange, very clear. The nose is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. You can smell the oak. Oak is what immediately hits you, but then get this very mentholy, minty, and it's almost like a cross in between menthol and anise. Mint or anise, maybe. But it just kind of clears the sinuses out. And there's hints of spice behind there, like cinnamon. And even some citrus. Slight amounts of vanilla. So a little bit of traditional casking sense to it, but really it's dominated by these sort of herbally, spicy, minty tones to it. So it's very, very different from your typical bourbon whiskey, as well as your Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey. Rye whiskey is something of its own, and like I say, it's my favorite. Mm. It's very spicy in the front and the middle. In the I'm not going to say hot like in alcohol hot. I mean spicy as in spicy. It truly feels like the tingle of cinnamon or peppermint. There's sort of woody citrus notes. The citrus, I would say, is grapefruit, but it's just a hint of it that's with the wood. And sort of predominant thing on your palate, though, is the spiciness and the mintiness of it. I'm not really sure if I should call it mintiness because there's not really a mint flavor. Peppermint, maybe. Peppermint, spearmint is not very green. It's very red. It's very prickly in a good way. Interestingly, the sweetness, in opposition to the way bourbon usually is, the sweetness in this is in the back. The sweetness is in the finish, I find. And that's when you sort of taste more fruitiness. So let's see here. What kind of fruit is it? Maybe not grapefruit. Apricot, maybe? I'm not too big. I don't eat apricots. I don't like apricots in itself. And maybe that's the flavor I'm tasting. Mm. Damn, that's good. I just love that initial spicy, minty burst in the mouth. You know, like cinnamon red hots, only without the cinnamon flavor, it just really feels wonderful on the tongue and up into like the sinuses. Like I said, it clears you up, especially when the bottle is freshly opened. It's kind of muted now, but when you first open that bottle, man, that stuff is just like whoosh. So rye whiskey of the whiskeys is probably the one that is the most of an acquired taste after the more heavily peated scotches, and that's because of the spicy aspect of it. Most people, they don't like that sort of burn. But it's different from an alcohol burn. It's a spice burn, I find. And that spice comes from the rye. Rye is sort of spicy. You'll see it in the rye beers. It's a spicy aspect to rye beverages. Oh, so this is fairly cheap. This is $25. It is well worth the price. The George Dickel is roughly the same, but I find it is a lot more smoother. It rounds off the sharp edges of character. I like the sharp edges of the character. If you want something that's a bit more muted to go and introduce yourself to rye, definitely going out and get the George Dickel rye. It's $20, about $5 cheaper than this. But I can't say enough about rye. I love that it's coming back into style. Just as recently as 10 years ago, there was only about 2 brands of rye out there. And now there's a rye shortage. So that's why so many of these brewers distillers are going to the bulk distilleries to go and get their stocks. So, one final thing I'd like to say about rye is that this is actually the base of what a lot of older drinks that use bourbon nowadays actually should be using. If you like Manhattans, try it with rye, a good rye whiskey, as opposed to bourbon whiskey. It really, really makes a difference. So a Manhattan made with Buffalo Trace, which is bourbon I like, is a really good Manhattan, but it's not the same as a rye Manhattan, which is something just out of this world. I would say use something with a very high rye character just because of that very strong difference from your classic bourbon tastes. So, all in all, rye whiskey. Drink and enjoy, my friends.